Hey, it's Mark Bergin from the Browns Nation Station. The listeners of the Browns Nation Station can show their Browns Nation pride by going to brownsnationswag.com. The site has all the latest and best fan gear to represent your team. Again, that's brownsnationswag.com. Also, if you're listening to the Browns Nation Station on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the show so you don't miss another episode. All right, cue the music. It's time to start the show. Welcome to the Browns Nation Station. I'm your host, Mark Bergin, joined today by fellow brownsnation.com writer Steven Kubitza. Steven, we are recording this after the Browns' 41-35 win over the Tennessee Titans. And I'll tell you what, Steven, I thought today we were going to say how this was the Baker Mayfield game, but really that game went down to the wire. But the Browns improved to 9-4, first time they've been, 9-3, and it's the first time they've been 9-3 since the 1994 season. It's going to be this team's first winning record in 13 years. But Baker Mayfield really went off in the first half in this one.
Yeah, it was easily his best game. I mean, of the year, of course, but maybe ever, given the competition, given the, what's at stake, trying to hold on for a playoff spot. It's not like they're, 3-7 and he has a good game. So it was really exciting, and it was so much was happening so fast in the first half. It was tough to keep up in a good way.
And I just want to point out that this Titans defense is not the same defense we saw a season ago. A Titans team that went to the AFC Championship before falling to the Kansas City Chiefs, who went on to win the Super Bowl. Jadeveon Clowney's out for the season, and Gerald Casey's now in Denver. This is not the same Titans defense that we saw a season ago, a team that relies heavily on Derrick Henry from an offensive standpoint and then relied on stout defensive football. I don't want to take anything away from Baker Mayfield's first half performance, 4 first half touchdowns. First time that's happened for a Browns quarterback. The only other one, Otto Graham, in 1951. So you got to go back quite a ways for that one. I really thought we were going to be talking about how well Mayfield played in this one, but I'm sorry, Steven, that fumble at the end of the game to give the Titans a chance on an onside kick in what was a one-score game. I know the Browns cover the 4-point spread, but this was really a tale of two halves, and that fumble by Mayfield late in the fourth quarter is simply inexcusable.
Yeah, I didn't like the play call in the first place, having your quarterback. I mean, you have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both available. If you're going to run the ball, just hand it off. So much can happen on a QB sneak. Someone could get hurt. You could fumble. But with your saying, the tale of two halves, it's like every NFL team has this problem. It's that when you go up big, you change your entire game plan and stop sticking with what was going well. And fans say, on Twitter, keep trying to score. The announcers say the same thing, but coaches always change. And then seeing what happened in the second half, I mean, to me, was not a surprise. But yeah, that fumble there, I think, just summed up Stefanski maybe trying to get too, not too cute, but just not sticking with what works with the two, best rushing attack in the league.
I hear you. I'm going to disagree with you here, Steven. I'm going to push back. I thought the play call was fine because Mayfield had the first down. He simply has to hang on to the ball in that situation. We know how effective a QB sneak is in a short yardage situation. If you want to be a QB in this league, you've got to be able to execute on that play. I know Mayfield felt that he was down, but after the replay review, it was upheld. And so that matters because thankfully Kareem Hunt was able to run down the Titans defender, but that completely flips the field. The Titans, even if Mayfield doesn't convert on that fourth down, or even if the Titans just recover the ball, but they don't get the big run back, they still have to go the full length of the field instead of flipping the field on one play. And if the Titans get an onside kick at the end, and I know we're talking hypotheticals at that point, especially considering how much the Browns led in this one, but I go back to my point of this being the tale of two halves. 38-7 at halftime for the Browns, probably the best first half of football they've played in maybe in franchise history because it was the most points that they've put up in franchise history in a first half. But then to come out in the second half, and I understand you're going to be playing more conservatively to try to churn and burn out as much clock as you can, but getting outscored 28-3 in the second half against better competition, if you only play 2 quarters of football, I'm looking at this Monday night football game already, Steven, against the Ravens next weekend in a do or die situation for Baltimore. So if the Browns, look, good win over a team in the Titans that still leads the AFC South, a team that I do expect to make the playoffs, but they can't be this tale of two halves. This can't happen against the elite competition in this league if once you get into the playoffs, if you actually want to win once you're there.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, I guess. And for anyone watching, I'm wearing a Baker sweatshirt, so I'm not trying to be a Baker apologist, but I look at, I mean, they put up 41 points. That fumble is a killer. Could have been much worse, obviously, if, maybe the onside kick rules weren't changed to be so difficult for the kicking team to recover. But defense was questionable, too, in that second half. And, I mean, if the Titans defense does a little better, the Browns defense was getting just gashed by the Titans on 2-minute drives or 1-minute drives. So, for me, Baker – I mean, you got to hold on the ball, but I never played any high levels of football, but I don't like quarterbacks running the ball. It just seems, unless it's like a Lamar Jackson type situation. But I think maybe Stefanski goes, we're up, 13 at that point, 13, 14. Not the end of the world, but definitely something to learn from late game situations. Maybe, work with Baker on, if we're going to sneak the ball, just cover it up. Like, there's no way you should be fumbling the ball. But, being a Cleveland lifer and a non-objective Browns viewer, very happy with the win. And I was watching saying, okay, this is the only team that has an uncomfortable 31-point lead. So I guess at this point, I'm used to it. And the fact they held on was all I cared about. But it is a problem when you're watching and saying, they're up 31 and this is the game's not over. So
how nervous were you, Steven, in all honesty, at the end there, that the Browns are going to somehow lose this in miraculous fashion?
Yeah, my height of concern was, I think, with about, 12, 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and, they're up 20, and I'm just watching, I'm going, oh no, like they're going to blow this. But then, we had some turnovers. The Titans, had that drop pass that turned into an interception too later in the quarter. So anytime I would start to get nervous, somehow the Titans would ease the concerns. But I think most people, most lifer Browns fans, or at least people watching since, let's say, 2007, had zero confidence that they were going to win the game until that onside kick was recovered.
I hear you. I do have to give Mayfield credit. His first half performance was outstanding. In the first half, 20 of 25, 290 yards, and 4 touchdown passes in the first half. He finishes 25 of 33, 334 yards with those 4 touchdowns. He was absolutely remarkable in the first half in showing why. Will the team pick up his 5th-year option on his rookie deal or decide to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and give this guy the big contract extension he's been seeking? He had it going in the first half. And I have to say this as well. I'm going to do live math here in a second, Steven, while you fill for a second. But how many different receivers he completed passes to in distributing the football out to all of the different skill position players, I also thought was impressive in this one.
Well, looking at the box score, you have 10, but Baker has a reception, and so does Kendall Lamb, offensive lineman touchdown. So pretty much everyone on offense who was available is getting a catch. And one of the big stories, I think, too, is, a healthy Jarvis Landry. He criticized, OBJ would get criticized, but they're both out there playing hurt. I mean, Landry was crawling off the field every time he was tackled earlier this season. So he's finally healthy. And he's showing up, and it's not like, oh, he's finally good. It's no, he can finally breathe after he gets tackled, and it's making a huge difference. You look at the box score too. Hollywood Higgins, 6 catches, 95 yards, and every time he does well, I get extremely frustrated because he was exiled last year for no good reason. He has the best chemistry with Baker on the team, and even Peoples-Jones today had his drop touchdown. And then right away, 75-yard touchdown reception. So, like you said, Baker spreading the ball around well. And I mean, even getting Kendall Lamb in there on the receiving box score.
I always love to see a big fella score. And I tell you what, this is a news flash to any opposing defensive coordinator that's going to play the Browns this season. Jarvis Landry is left-handed. And we've seen this week in and week out. as Browns fans, in the sense that I love seeing him throw the ball on trick plays because he's really, really effective. Like, I hate to think worst case scenario, but if Baker Mayfield and Case Keenum were ever to go down, I would want to put Jarvis Landry back there just because he kind of seems to know what he's doing. And I like that completion he had to Mayfield, and he also earned the roughing the passer penalty. Steven, I'm going to be honest with you. I've been watching football for a long time. I did not realize that there could be a roughing the passer penalty on a trick play where a wide receiver throws the ball, and that helped set up the touchdown pass to Jarvis Landry later on that drive.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. I was kind of confused during the game. I thought it was maybe more so an unnecessary roughness. I know they called it, roughing. But because that seems like a tricky penalty, because what if you're running a reverse and you're about to get drilled and you just throw the ball, or you see you're going to get hit low or something. So yeah, it's another example of the NFL rules making no sense, and you learn something new even though you've been watching for decades. But yeah, it was a nice contrast in the game. That was the Browns' trick play, was giving it to Landry. He throws it to Baker. Perfect play. The Titans had a key play, I believe down 20. They're in the Wildcat and they fumble the snap. So you're looking at the contrast. It's, okay, the Browns are up. They can do this trick play and keep it simple, throw it 6 yards. The Titans needed to drive fast, and they're having a Wildcat play with Tannehill, who's lighting it up all day, once they got moving on their drive. So it was just a nice contrast of the Browns, their trick play not being something ridiculous or being a drive killer.
A key in this one, we talked turnovers a little bit earlier. The Titans turned the ball over 3 times in this one. The Browns only turned it over once. I thought that was huge, but getting the Titans out of their running game. Tannehill had to throw the ball 45 times in this one, and the Titans only ran the ball 18 times. Derrick Henry, 15 carries for only 60 yards. His long was 10 yards. And particularly in the first half, it wasn't just Baker Mayfield who had it going. It was this defense that limited Derrick Henry in the first half to 7 carries for 15 yards. So, yeah, the Browns defense in the second half at times was flimsy, but in the first half, they really, really buckled down, and they shut down Derrick Henry in this one, especially a guy who can show just a week ago when he goes off for 100-plus yards and 3 touchdowns. That was a key in this one going in of which team can establish its running game more, and shutting down Derrick Henry the way that the Browns did today. My hat's off to the Cleveland defense in that regard.
Yeah, that was huge. The only problem was that Tannehill kept coming out and
Right?
looking pretty good. But, I mean, he had some key drops from his receivers. But, yeah, taking Henry out of the game is humongous. I mean, of course, they had 38 points at halftime. The Browns did. So Titans are going to come out throwing. But if Derrick Henry busts off a few big runs early on, I mean, it could be a totally different pace of the game too. So, I mean, they were able to get the ball back and score quickly thanks to that. My only problem, though, like I said, you have Henry take it out of his hands. The secondary is without Denzel Ward. So, we're forcing the Titans to pass more, and they did well. But, it's just too much of a deficit and a few too many mistakes, too.
A few other things in this one. Welcome back, Myles Garrett. He missed the last 2 games because he tested positive for COVID-19. So he had a sack today. He's now up to 10.5 on the season. So it was nice to see him get into the mix there. And we know his importance. I know he didn't play probably as many plays as Browns fans might have liked to see in this one, but he is going to have to work himself back into game shape after missing the last 2 weeks. Make sure he's healthy and ready to go down the stretch run for Cleveland. So welcome back there. And then Jack Conklin going up against his former team in this one too. And I'll be honest with you, I was kind of surprised that this wasn't more of a ground and pound action. This kind of turned more into a shootout, especially with, again, I go back to the tale of 2 halves of all the points that these 2 teams put up. Certainly something I didn't expect. I thought it might be a lower scoring game where whichever team controls the clock and gets out to an early lead might have the advantage. But those were some things that stuck out. I go back to the interceptions being key. I'll say one other thing too. Penalties for Cleveland was just very, very frustrating, especially in the second half where it's like, put this game away. And the Browns, I'm pulling up the team stats, bear with me here, had 13 penalties for 92 yards in this one. And it just seemed penalty after penalty after penalty after penalty kept Tennessee in this one.
Yeah, it seems like with the Browns, there's always something after a win that's frustrating. And luckily the penalties didn't kill them. There was a few, very frustrating ones, like a defensive holding on fourth down. You had a false start and an extra point attempt. Just, inexcusable penalties. But at least with, a lot of times in the past, you say, okay, that's on the coach. The go-to coach speak, football analyst thing is they're undisciplined. That's why they're holding. It's like, well, some guys get beat and they're trying to, make up for it. But I don't think this goes on the coaching. I don't know what it is. Maybe just, chalk it up to a sloppy game. But it's going to be something to keep an eye on, especially Monday Night Football if Lamar Jackson's back, which he should be by then. Are we going to lose a game late? Like could have happened in Tennessee because of a defensive holding, or even on the Browns had an interception taken away because they had a hit to the head of a receiver and the ball was just about to drop into the Browns defender's hands and someone's hitting the receiver in the head. It's, you just have to be smarter, and it's going to happen with a thinned secondary. But I mean, stuff like that can, you can lose a game because of it, and definitely keeps Browns fans wary, even when you have a 31-point lead.
And I think that goes back to the importance of winning the turnover battle. And thankfully, the Browns didn't have any up until that last fumble by Baker Mayfield. And thankfully, it did not cost Cleveland in this one. I'll say this, Mayfield has not thrown an interception since that Cincinnati game on the play Odell Beckham Jr. was injured all the way back on October the 25th. And I know that was a big thing for Mayfield coming into the season is, can you limit your interceptions and turnovers as a quarterback? Since that play, he's thrown 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, and the Browns are 5-1 in that stretch. And so going into the stretch run, I don't want to count the chickens before they hatch, Steven, but I think the way Mayfield's been playing is proving, I think at the very least, I don't know about a long-term contract extension, but if they're not going to pick up that fifth-year option on his rookie deal, you better have a pretty good alternative plan if you're not going to decide to pick up that fifth-year option.
Yeah, they have to pick it up at this point. I mean, at least pick it up, and then next year could be talking with his agent about potential extensions. But I mean, a lot of local sports talk this week. There was some, it was just Twitter controversy. So take that for whatever that means to you. Conversations of, well, maybe the Browns could trade for Matt Stafford. It's like, well, who's better, Baker or Stafford? So it's just these kind of, when you have a 5-hour show, it's conversations you're creating out of nothing. But it was, debates between people, and it's, what has Matt Stafford done anyway? It's just a ludicrous argument. Baker was a number one pick. Look at him today. He, like you said, hasn't thrown an interception since October. Are you not going to pick up his fifth-year option as to be weird and try to light a fire under him or something? No, Andrew Berry seems like a smart guy. You pick it up, do what every other team does that you're supposed to do when your player's not a bust. And let the agent deal with it while he plays his fourth year.
And Stafford's much older than Mayfield, too, with that argument. So that's something I don't understand. I was tweeting a little bit during the game, Steven, and everyone who says, oh, we should have brought Case Keenum in earlier in this season has all of a sudden go silent. And all of a sudden, there's no one out there at all who advocated for Case Keenum to start over Baker Mayfield when both players are healthy. I know this is a debate we've had time and time and time again, and just how ludicrous that argument is. But all the Keenum truthers have all of a sudden gone mute with how Mayfield has played in these last several games. But I know that there was a faction of the fan base that wanted that. And some people who talk about the Browns, whether it's radio hosts, whether it's other media members, those people were out there, Steven, and all of a sudden they've gone awfully quiet with how Baker's played the last several weeks.
Yeah, I was a Keenum believer with an exception. I said that he came in earlier in the year when Baker's ribs appeared to be so, messed up that he couldn't even throw the ball. I was like, okay, if he's out there and every time he throws it, he keels over in pain, what are we doing? But I think that, that argument arises, week one, they lose 38-6. Everyone's hyped up, COVID year, everything's crazy. We got football back, and they just look like a disaster. So the natural Browns fan thing to do is say, okay, get the backup in. I mean, it's always going to happen. But yeah, you do see those people, they're sticking to these arguments. It's just nonstop. Like, why are you dying on this hill? And then later on, they go quiet. And if you bring it up, it's just, I mean, I guess that's the way of the sports talk world and social media world. But I know why the Keenum truthers were there, but it is nice that that conversation has faded away because, I mean, like you looking at Baker's stats, 4 touchdowns today. His rating has been over 100 on, it looks like at least half his games. My quick math looking at the box scores here. Yeah, Case Keenum is not going to give you anything better than what Baker's doing. And benching a number 1 pick in a year where you have to decide his option for Case Keenum is actually insane. And Kevin Stefanski is a normal coach and has luckily decided not to create any controversy like in 2014 when Manziel came in for Brian Hoyer. You create your own controversy and it sinks you. So luckily Stefanski's smarter than that.
It was after week 1 in Baltimore. It was week 6, the blowout loss to the Steelers. In week 8 against the Raiders, that was the first crappy weather game. I don't know how else to put that. When they lost 16-6, they've got the bye week. And then the following 2 weeks, the wins over the Houston Texans and the Eagles were both 1-score games. And people can look at those box scores. So 122 yards against the Raiders, 132 against the Texans, only 204 against the Eagles. And some people say, oh, well, the production's not there. Well, that does. If you're just looking at the numbers and you don't remember, I'll refresh your memory. The weather was terrible on all 3 of those games, which certainly contributed to his on-field play because when conditions are right, things are clicking, we can see what he can do on a game like today. And it just cracks me up when people want to cherry pick stats with this guy for or against him instead of looking at the full body of work. And the full body of work says 9-3 this season. He's done what he's been asked to do. Okay, yeah, there's times he just has to hand the ball off to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. But how many other quarterbacks in the league would you want passing versus just handing those 2 guys the ball? The Browns are 9-3 for the first time since 1994. 1994. You're not just talking about years. You're not just talking about decades. You're talking about like a full generation since the Browns have been this good to where they're now the number 1 wild card team. They're in their own control. They're in control whether they make the playoffs or not. And I certainly expect that looking at the schedule moving forward because, okay, Baltimore next week on Monday Night Football, it's going to be tough. And I'd like to see them play the Ravens a lot closer than they did in week 1. But then you've got the Giants, you've got the Jets, and you've got the Steelers. So 2 of the last 4 games are pretty tough, but certainly I would expect the Browns to be favored over both New York teams, and I'd certainly expect them to win both of those games as well.
Yeah, to several of your points, I'll start with those 3 games of the bad weather. I mean, I live, like I brought up in the past, pretty close to the stadium and just a town over. And I could describe that weather as like weather that you see and you kind of get worried. You're like, oh, tree limbs might start coming down. Tree limbs were coming down. It's hailing sideways into your house. And that's happening and they played a football game in it. So it was just horrible weather. And then in terms of looking at, his body of work and cherry picking stats, I hate that because if you look at, let's say we say, okay, Patrick Mahomes had 50 touchdowns. But what if he had 25 in the last 7 weeks? Are we going to say, well, he only had this many early on, or this game he did this? It's like, no, you have to look at the full body of work when you analyze a player's season. It's like in baseball, if you were to say, oh, well, he only he's hitting 180 in the first 2 weeks of April. It's like, what? Like, it's an average. And if you're looking at Baker's stats, you have to look for, he comes into the game, had 3 straight games with no touchdowns during that stretch of bad weather. Has 2 last week, 4 today. He's getting back to normal. So it drives me insane when people go, well, look at this game. Or they say, well, if we take away his touchdowns in the Cincinnati game, he only has this many. Well, if you take away anyone's 5 touchdown performance, they're going to have 5 fewer touchdowns. So that never makes sense to me. And I definitely think you have to look at the full body of work. The panic in week 1 makes sense, but are we really thinking right now like, oh, well, Baker had me really worried week 1? It's no, like, look how great he's playing now and developing throughout the year.
Which teams in the AFC really scare you from a playoff picture? And I'm looking at the standings right now. So the Steelers are still undefeated. They'll play tomorrow night on Monday Night Football. They'll play at 5 o'clock on Monday. Then the Chiefs, obviously, the lone loss the Chiefs have is against the Raiders this season. Other than that, in the AFC, maybe Buffalo. The other teams that are in the AFC playoffs right now, if the season were to end this minute, you've got Buffalo at the 3 seed, the Titans at the 4 seed. So if the season ended right now, the Browns would play the Titans again in Nashville, which they just beat the Titans on the road today. Then you've got the Dolphins at the 6 seed and the Colts at the 7 seed. Maybe say if Las Vegas sneaks in, they've got a decent rushing attack with Josh Jacobs. If Baltimore gets right, but Baltimore's dealt with several injuries along their offensive line, and they're not the same as they were a season ago. Really, in my eyes, Steven, the only 2 teams where it's just like, okay, I know I'm definitely beat if you're a Browns fan, would be either Pittsburgh or Kansas City. And I'm really curious to see how the Browns play Pittsburgh in the final week of the season. Maybe the Steelers will be resting their starters by that point, but you get a rematch and you get a better gauge of how do we stack up against Pittsburgh several weeks after that October loss. But are you with me here in the sense that the Steelers and the Chiefs are really the only 2 teams that really, really scare me in the AFC, or am I missing something here?
No, I'm the same way. I was looking at the playoff picture before this game, before everything, standing shifted this week. But I looked, I said, okay, I want the Browns. They have to avoid the Chiefs in the first round. I think the Chiefs are the best team in football. Obviously, the Steelers have the better record, and they killed the Browns earlier this year. But I do think the Browns match up better because the Chiefs, look at the Browns defense today when the Titans kind of, ran right through them, still put up a good amount of points. This isn't college football. This is the NFL. So giving up that many points is not great. But the Chiefs, I think, can score 6 touchdowns like in rapid succession. Look at last year. They were up 24-0 on the Texans in the playoffs, and they weren't worried. They went down, they scored a touchdown. They're like, all right, we're going to come back and win this game. And it was just so easy. So you look at them, to me, as the top team. Pittsburgh, of course, because they're undefeated, and the Browns had never beat the Steelers. But after that, the Dolphins, no worry about the Dolphins. Already beat the Colts, beat the Titans. The Raiders game was in swirling winds, and the Raiders only beat the Jets today because Greg Williams clearly tanked the game for his defense, calling a cover 0 blitz on a 3rd and 10 with 10 seconds left from the 50-yard line. And a play before that, Derek Carr almost hit a deep touchdown pass to Henry Ruggs. So Greg Williams says, let's blitz him again. And then touchdown. Browns fans could look at that and go, yeah, he's terrible. Like, why would you hire him? But that's a whole other story. So, but yeah, the only team, Chiefs and Steelers. But yeah, the Greg Williams thing is it's actually insane. Like, it's painful to watch.
My theory there is that Greg Williams wants that head coaching job
for 2 games at the end of the season to beat the Browns. It's his master plan.
Oh, man. A guy that Browns fans are well familiar with just a few seasons ago, taking over as the interim and going 5-3 just a few years ago after the firing of Hugh Jackson. But I love your breakdown of Greg Williams. That's fantastic. That is absolutely
he's a terrible
terrific.
Defensive coordinator, and he ran Bountygate, and he calls blitzes all the time. It's like playing Madden and doing Engage 8 every time. And then Adam Gase is probably on the sidelines with his crazy eyes, like, what is going on? It's just like the poor Jets and Sam Darnold. It's hopefully the Browns drop like 49 points on them or something and just, clean house there and let them reset.
If you're the Jets, though, if you're thinking logically, right, you're obviously already eliminated from the playoffs. If you lose today, at least you control your own destiny in getting that first overall pick and hopefully convincing Trevor Lawrence to play for your franchise. Now, that's been a debate between a lot of people of, if you're Trevor Lawrence, are you going to even agree to go to the Jets? Or are you going to pull an Eli Manning and say, I'm not playing for your franchise because I get one shot at a pro career. So we'll see how all of that unfolds. But the Jets certainly should not have lost today, and somehow they do. And again, that's a team that the Browns play in week 16 of the season. So I can't wait to see. I'm curious to see what the lines are in these last 4 weeks, because hosting Baltimore on Monday Night Football in a do or die game, I honestly think that the Ravens are going to be favored, just because I would expect Lamar Jackson to be back on the field after he was on the COVID-19 list. Against the Giants and Jets, Giants, I know have won 3 in a row, but they look, any NFC East team you should beat, plain and simple, you should beat. And they're also without Daniel Jones for the foreseeable future. The Jets still haven't won a game. And then Pittsburgh, even if Pittsburgh loses all of its games between now and then, I would expect Pittsburgh to remain a pretty hefty favorite over Cleveland in the final week of the season. But remember, with Pittsburgh, they have 2 key defensive injuries, both with Devin Bush, the linebacker, and with Bud Dupree, the outside linebacker. So 2 key players on that Steelers defense no longer there. And that's going to be a void that the Steelers have to try to overcome as they continue on into the season. They're still undefeated, and they're going to get every team's best shot, because that pressure continues to mount week after week after week after week as you continue to run the table. I certainly wouldn't expect the Steelers to run the table down this stretch in terms of to continue to go undefeated. I don't know when specifically that they'll lose, but I would be shocked if they go into week 17 against this Browns team still at 15-0, trying to go for 16-0. But we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out, and that's part of the fun down the stretch. But the Browns appear to be that they'll be in the playoffs this season. It's something I expected before the year. And getting the win over the Titans today, maybe you would say that the win over the Colts earlier this year was this team's signature win, but certainly one of the team's 2 best wins so far in the 2020 season.
Yeah, this is definitely it. I think it was a signature game, signature win for Hollywood Higgins. Myles Garrett comes back, just after recovering from what sounded like a pretty serious case of COVID. So, these guys are coming back saying, I still can't smell anything. I'm like, this is, these guys are a lot tougher than I am. But, yeah, signature win. You have a sloppy win over the Jaguars, pull one out close against the Eagles and the Texans. The Bengals barely beat the Bengals. So, yeah, this is easily it. And there's that weird narrative of, they only beat bad teams. It goes, well, you should beat the bad teams. They finally get a win against a playoff contending team. So it's nice to see that maybe that can be buried, because it's not, the Browns had a sloppy win. The national narrative should be, okay, how did the Titans lose to the Browns? Like, what's wrong with the Titans? I think maybe that could flip a little bit. And it shouldn't be about the Browns getting a sloppy win, because it was more so the Titans just ran out of time. The Browns knew their lead was big enough.
And at least the Browns covered today. The Browns were 4-point underdogs entering this one, and they cover that. And again, I go back to how Baker Mayfield played in the first half. If he could put that together for a full game, you're seeing why he was the number 1 overall pick. You're seeing why he was the Heisman winner, and you're seeing why the Browns saw what they saw in him. And I do think he can be better than a game manager. We've said this week in and week out of he hasn't played quite up to being that number 1 overall pick, but the way he was slinging it in the first half, it was like, wow, maybe he has finally started to things are finally starting to click with him. And that goes back to, he's only in his 3rd season and he's on his 4th different head coach. And you see what he does with a large sample size. And when you look at that at 9-3, you've got to be awfully excited if you're a Browns fan.
Yeah. And I am. So
yeah, you got the sweatshirt on. You got the sweatshirt on. So you're all ready to go. Anything else you want to get to, Steven, before we sign off here? Again, the Browns taking care of business in Nashville at Nissan Stadium this afternoon, winners over the Titans 41-35. Final thoughts, Steven.
I think my main takeaway, and I was thinking about this before we started recording here, is that, it was like a boring game. Like when your team wins big in any sport, it's boring, but that's what you want. Like the Browns had, late comeback by the Titans, but there really was no major drama from this game. Usually in a Browns game, you could talk for 3 hours about all this side stuff that's happening, but this was just what good teams do. They put up 41 points. They win the game. Your defense is having a rough day. Okay, our quarterback will, sling it down the field, 75-yard touchdown pass to a rookie, just with ease. So it's nice this season just to be able to not have to talk about nonsense. And this win against the Titans, I was at the Titans-Browns opener last year. I was all excited, and the Browns got smoked. And I went home. I was freaking out. Definitely gave me the Sunday scaries. So this was a nice change just to get up big and say, okay, you guys can come back, but, you're definitely going to run out of time.
I remember that game. We talked about the penalties earlier from this one. All of the penalties in that opening week game. I know it was, I forget what the total yardage was, but it was something absolutely insane. It was like, welcome to the Freddie Kitchens era of football, something that only lasted one season in Cleveland.
Well, that game too, what happened to Greg Robinson, I'm pretty sure stomped someone, got ejected, and then that week got arrested for having like a kilo of marijuana in his car trying to cross the border or something. It's like, what is wrong with this team? So there's none of that this year. There's no stories that drop that are insane. It's just focused on football.
100%. So again, the Browns will play the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football. So I'll be back with our other colleague, Wendy Oliveros, after that one. So I'm excited to talk with her, get her takeaway. She was on the Browns Nation station a few weeks back. I'm really curious to see what happens in this one because, again, you go back to that week one blowout loss when the Ravens looked to continue what they were doing in the 2019 season. But can the Ravens win a game on the road really for a game where it's do or die for Baltimore in this one? If the Ravens want to have a serious chance of making the playoffs, they absolutely need this one. So I would imagine the Ravens will throw the kitchen sink at the Browns trying to win because Ravens are 6-5, not trending in the right direction as we go to the last quarter of the season. I can't wait to watch this one at First Energy Stadium, two AFC North foes in a showdown in Cleveland. I can't wait.
Yeah, and it stinks it's not going to be a packed house, but is what it is this year. They're going to have some fans there. It's just good there's football being played. And it's going to be nice to have a Sunday off. That's always nice from watching, panicking about the Browns and finally I thought this game should have been flexed in the Sunday Night Football, but, finally getting a primetime slot is going to be fun. And I don't think it's going to be a 38-6 blowout. So
and remember,
to see what happens.
The Ravens did not play today because they're playing Tuesday night against the Cowboys. So keep an eye on that one to see if Lamar Jackson's back on the field, what he looks like, just because, again, I know he was on the COVID list too, so he might have a little bit of rust there too. I'm curious to see how he performs. But, Steven, always a pleasure to do the show with you, and we'll be excited to have you back here in a few weeks. And we've got some exciting news for our listeners here in a little bit too about how you're going to be joining the show on a more permanent basis moving forward. But always fun talking Browns football. Always fun talking Browns football after a win as well.
Oh, yeah. It's it truly makes the week better. And, the sun sets in Cleveland at what seems like 2 p.m. So it definitely makes the rest of the night better. You can enjoy the rest of the football for the day without any stress. And you don't have to watch and say, oh, well, why can't the Browns do this? They put up 41 points today. Very rare occasion here. So excited about it.
We'll see if the Browns can keep it going on Monday Night Football. But for Steven Kubitza, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for listening to the Browns Nation station. Please go leave us a 5-star review. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. I'll see you next week after Browns Ravens. Take care, and so long, everyone.